Landlords of Reddit, what's the strangest discovery you've had renting out to people? Story 1. My dad is a landlord and once had a tenant leave on not great terms. I was brought in to help clean up an apartment full of a lot of random trash. The strange part is there were a lot of open shelves in the kitchen, just stacked to the brim, with 5-gallon containers of lighter fluid. We figured she may have been planning something if for some reason she didn't get her deposit back or something. No idea why she left them, though, as they must have cost quite a bit. Story 2. Rented an apartment for a 6-month lease. The tenant paid all 6 months in advance as well as a deposit. Never made a sound and never really saw him. One day, the upstairs neighbor said he heard someone leaving in the middle of the night. We went expecting the worst. Apartment was immaculate. Looked like no one ever lived there apart from some food in the fridge. Cleaned it out and went to the dumpster out back where we found parts of a hydroponic setup. Plastic sheeting, tubes, empty nutrient jugs. Guess they would rent a spot, grow and leave after a harvest or two. Genius and not mad, really. Took the PVC pipes about 8 in diameter with 4-inch holes every few inches, put dirt in it, and turned it into a hanging outdoor planter for flowers. Story 3. We kicked a dude out because he was honestly just kind of weird. He packed up his things and left. We went into his room to clean up a bit and found multiple piles of dead ants, dirt everywhere, and 8 bottles of piss. He lived with us for a month. We let a family friend stay in our loft guest room above the garage for about 3 weeks. The garage wasn't connected, but it wasn't more than a 15-foot walk to the house and bathroom. He was asked to leave when he was completely nude, on our couch and drunk, when I walked in from picking up the kids from school. He had no idea what was wrong with being spread eagle in front of some 3, 5, and 8-year-old. When we were cleaning out the room after he left, we found a trash can full of his urine, along with too many liquor bottles to count. Story 4. A large boa constrictor that the renters had hidden in a closet because we had a no pets policy. A few weeks ago, the maintenance guy at my apartment complex brought me a guinea pig. I answered the door and he was like, "Hey, I know you have one of these hamster things. It looks like the one you have. Do you want it?" I have no idea what to do with it. Apparently, the people next door had a guinea pig and didn't want it anymore. So they just let it loose in their apartment and left. He found it in a closet hiding under some clothes they left. I was afraid it might be a girl because my boy guinea pig started freaking out. He was hopping around his cage and squeaking really loud. I took the guinea pig to my vet who told me it was a boy. He was just excited to have a friend. They're best friends now. Story 5. Poop sticks. We did Airbnb for a while, more than 2 years, and had a variety of people come and go. One person did not listen to us when we said, "You need to hold down the handle when flushing a too," just because our plumbing was old. A diet consisting largely of milk, butter, and bread resulted in lots of clogs. This person thought plungers were dirty, though, so they would go to the yard, get a large twig, and break up the clog, with that then reflush. The stick would then go into the trash. When they finally left our place, we found a bunch of sticks in their closet for just that reason, waiting to be used. Story 6. My parents rented out their empty house while they were staying out of state to a couple who really needed a place to stay. The couple ended up trashing the place completely, and my parents had no experience as landlords and were totally taken advantage of. Their small dog chewed up all the siding up to his height level in the backyard. All the fans were missing blades somehow. We found them in the bathtubs. They dropped a weight on the floor and it went straight through the subfloor. They covered it up with a sticky tile. They had their bedroom set in the living room and used the bedrooms as a living room because the wife said she was diagnosed with claustrophobia. It was all really weird. But the strangest thing we found when we helped my parents clean it up to sell it was that they had been using one of the bedrooms as a home gym. And we couldn't figure out why there was grease stains all over the walls. It was like a border of grease all at torso height. We later found out from the neighbor, who the renter tried to get to join CrossFit in his home gym, that the husband would do handstand push-ups in that room, and the grease stains were actually all sweaty butt prints. Story 7. Our first tenants ever were this old man and his mother. Super nice guy who said he just takes care of mom and just low-key people. Sounded perfect. First odd request we got was like a week before they were to move in. They asked if it would be okay to store some of their potted plants on the front patio, so we obliged. Next day, we went by the house, and there were literally 20 to 30 potted plants there. I just figured it was odd and thought nothing else about it. About a week into their lease, we get a call from the landscapers saying the police had just run them off the property and something was going down. We get over to the rental, and this 90-year-old lady is very upset and says the police took her son, and she doesn't know why. We help her get into contact with family to come over from another state to help this woman. Well, after speaking with detectives, we find out the truth. They've been going to every single Home Depot, Fry's Marketplace, etc., and stealing tons of items. All those potted plants were just taken from the front of Home Depots and Fry's. Ended up being this whole theft ring, and they'd stolen like $130,000 worth of goods and had it in our rental and storage facilities. Story 8. I used to work at a property preservation company, managing maintenance on foreclosure properties. One of our contractors found a cell in the garage. I'm talking metal bars, floor to ceiling, maybe 6 inches at most on each side. The house was on the street behind the last place I'd lived. Creepy. We also had the deer massacre property. Mass grave of at least 50 deer, many in pieces. It was a long trench full of grossness. There were regularly overflowing crap toilets. One was so bad they must have used a stool to stand on to poop so they could make it bigger. It was like 2 inches over the rim. My boss photoshopped Jabba the Hutt size and mouth on it, and we called it Jabba the Poo. Icicle houses were always fun. House wouldn't be winterized, so a pipe would break and water would leak for days. I saw one with a frozen waterfall coming out of the seam between the first and second floor, right over the door. A different company. We had a cow wander into the house, go in the bathroom, turn around, and close the door on itself. It died and melted. R.I.P. Puddle Cow. Story 9. That there are people out there that let their children play on the roof. I noticed a couple of cracked tiles, so got a roofer in. Got a large bill and saw many tiles had been replaced. I spoke to the neighbor, and he said their kids used to play up there all the time, don't mind you. This is the same tenant that used to smoke in bed and stub their cigarettes out on their bedside table. When they moved out, the nicotine was running down the bedroom walls. They did, however, appreciate fresh air in the bedroom at least. The sliding door was never closed. Ever. The rain came in and rotted the floor out. Literally a gaping hole in the floor. Ah, the joys of renting. Story 10. I worked for a company with rentals many years ago, and they had rented to a Southeast Asian family after they had been relocated to the U.S. after the Vietnam War and subsequent violence there. One day I went to the property and went downstairs, which was entirely flooded. I'm talking like 5 feet of water, where they were raising hundreds of carp and other fish, presumably for many years, complete with other plants, rice, and as a result, many other living things in there. They didn't really know any better. Old men and women ripped out of their homeland after 50 to 60 years and transplanted to the Midwest. They did what they thought was completely normal. Story 11. Manage office buildings. One that comes to mind is a tenant that knew for some time they were going bankrupt and handled it in the worst possible way. Rather than tell us, they moved out in the middle of the night. So instead of happily finding a new tenant in the several months they paid, building was 100% occupied, and new tenants were about 10% above their rent. Our legal team went after them, ended up getting into personal assets of the owner, because we were entitled to several more years' rent and unamortized costs under their lease. They also left furniture, electronics, and supplies worth about 2 years' rent in their space for us to claim and sell. Yet they took some rented or leased OT and office equipment and had vendors hunting them down. Story 12. Lady next door to the unit in question kept calling in saying that something smells so good from the neighbor, but that he wouldn't answer the door when she tried to find out what it was that he was cooking. After not receiving rent, 3 weeks later, we placed a 12-hour notice and entered to find him dead on the floor from a heroin overdose. There was heroin everywhere, under the rug, in a hole in the wall, behind the tile in the bathroom. Pull the carpet up. A good year's supply of all dirty needles. There's probably a few grand worth of illegal narcotics in there, and the smell she was smelling was, in fact, him cooking his own stuff. Story 13. Kind of vice versa. My girlfriend and I have been renting our apartment from a guy for years. Really nice, normal, respectful. Responded quickly to emails, etc. One day our microwave breaks and he comes over to install a new one. I'm the only one home and we start talking. Turns out, a truther starts talking about how the Russian investigation is going to come back on Hillary Clinton. Trump is innocent. How his kids have autism due to the vaccines they received. Pizzagate crap. How websites like 4chan and 8chan have secret people within the government leaking what was going to happen. Total QAnon believer. I just stood there and said, yeah, we'll see, man, we will see. I knew people like this existed, but it's crazy that I had been paying one of them thousands of dollars every year. Story 14. My dad is a landlord, and he also is the property manager for the family next door. Boy, have I heard some stories. About 10 years ago, one family moved out and my dad went in to fix the place up. He said it was like they booby trapped the place. I can't remember much of that, but blades on all of the ceiling fans weren't screwed all the way and could easily fly off while the fan was running. He also said that the walls were a mess with, probably, hopefully, boogers and squashed bugs, and the kitchen was splattered with grease, and the carpet was getting pulled up in multiple places. I have more stories, but they're just boring or about how 9 out of 10 of the people who've ever rented were actually not good people. Recently, there was a girl living there who told everyone she was going to Harvard Law School in the fall. This was back in June. We found out that she was a compulsive liar through other things she had said. Story 15. My parents had rented out an apartment to an Indian couple who had a 5-year-old boy. When it came time for them to leave, my parents went to do the routine check and found all the corners of the walls were chewed roughly 3 feet up from the ground. Turns out their son would gnaw on the walls because he had some sort of calcium deficiency. The parents tried to argue that it wasn't their fault and that they wouldn't pay. Eventually, my parents got them to pay for the damages and then sold the apartment. Story 16. My grandma was renting out the bottom half of our duplex for a long while. We ended up evicting the tenants for not paying rent. Well, several days after they left, we heard strange noises coming from downstairs. We thought they had broken into the house. Finally, after looking around, we found an older black cat. They gave their cat a bowl of water and some dry food and left the poor thing there for us to find. They had stashed the water and food in the back of the closet, and we didn't see it when we changed the locks. Cat lived with us for a year or so until it got out of the house and became an outdoor cat. Story 17. My grandparents rented an apartment to a nice family. Mom, dad, 3 young kids. Always paid rent, were always easy to deal with. Never reported any problems. Model tenants, right? A week after they move out, grandfather goes in to check the place out and to sign off on a security deposit and get the place ready for the next tenants. Everything was gone. Everything. Little stuff like curtains and light bulbs, but also the curtain hooks, rods, and light fixtures, carpets, interior doorknobs, light switches, power outlets, and most of the associated wiring. The dishwasher, oven, kitchen sink, toilet. An attempt had been made on the bathtub, and that ended up being the only fixture in the place not taken. Court happened. Grandparents were awarded almost the entire value of the apartment in compensation. Story 18. A guy moved in and paid a year in advance on his rent. Included utilities. As his year was coming up, I was getting calls about a smell complaint coming from his condo. I went to check on him and found him dead on his sofa. He had been dead for months. Turns out he was facing major time behind bars for malpractice. He must have gone on a shopping spree shortly before because he had new everything. iPads, flat screen TVs, guitars, leather furniture, laptops, etc. Story 19. Father-in-law and I are landlords. Mine are upscale places, but there are lower rent types. Anyway, a murder had been committed in one of his small 2-room cottages. The coroner had removed the body, and the police had finished their investigation, so we were cleared to clean up the place. There was no one you could hire to do this cleanup back then, so we did it ourselves. The victim had been stabbed in his bed, so the mattress was a huge sponge soaked in blood. The perpetrator had dragged the body off the bed and out to his car. There was this long blood smear across the bedroom floor, through the living room floor, and across the porch where the body had been loaded into a car. The police had gone through the rooms with a huge black marker pen, making big circles around anything they thought important. Like holes in the couch could maybe be bullet holes. They put a big felt marker circle around the holes. Sofa's now junk, and the blood-soaked mattress went to the dump. Blood cleaned off the floors. A suspect had been pulled over. The empty trunk of his car was filled with blood, but no body, so he wasn't charged. Never found out if anyone was charged or convicted for that murder. Cottage cleaned up and we put it up for rent again. Story 20. I had a rental property in New Zealand where I live, and the agency rented it to some Pakistani Muslims. Apart from the 9-hour day cleaning the kitchen and the 2 or 3 weeks it took to get the smell of curry out of the place, the only weird thing was found when I decided to lift the carpet in the dining room to replace it. There was a giant bloodstain on the floor under the carpet. The top of the carpet was spotless. I also discovered blood sprayed up the door frames and had been wiped off, but there were blood droplets on the sides. Does that make sense? They either killed a sheep or their sister. I have no idea which. Story 21. I rented a house to a guy. He was a friend of a friend, needed a space and had cash. So I took a chance and gave him the keys. He moved out 4 months later. When I went to the place, he apparently didn't take any of his stuff with him. It was all still completely furnished. His bedroom, though, was stacked floor to ceiling with newspapers. So much newspaper, I was worried about my foundation. The bedroom is about 12 by 18 feet. It took a week to get all the paper out. I have no idea how he got it all in there or why. A friend suggested he may have been a paperboy, but he wasn't. The papers weren't stacks of the same newspaper, and there were, of course, duplicates, but the papers were all different types, different publishers, different towns. I still don't know what this guy was doing. Story 22. I got a great deal on a house because of one of these. My former landlord showed up to an empty house needing a complete renovation. Broken windows, blood, walls had been knocked down, electricity rewired to bypass the meter, remnants of a grow house, and a nice friendly note from the DEA demanding that he proved he was not involved. The funny part to me was that he had a security screen door on the front of the house that apparently was too hard for the DEA to bust through. So they broke down 3 doors on the side of the house. The next door neighbor was a sheriff and had no idea until the raid. Story 23. I had the U.S. Marshal's office contact me on behalf of a tenant to request that she be able to break her lease 4 months early. She turned state on her baby daddy, who was running meds up the West Coast, and they decided she needed to go into witness protection. The best part was USMS paid for professional movers and cleaners. Legit couldn't tell that anyone had ever lived there. I also had a buddy call me when his renters abandoned a house he owned. Apparently, they left a deer hanging in one of the sheds and needed my truck to help dispose of it. He called me on the 1st of April, so I didn't actually believe him until I got over there, and he opened the door and a wave of stench hit me. I'm still mad that his tenants wasted so much good meat letting that deer rot in the shed. Story 24. A long time ago, a fellow rented a store for my parents, was an artist and was going to paint landscapes. After 3 months, he stopped paying rent and was ducking out and hiding. After a while, mom loses patience and changes the locks and confiscates everything in the place. We found he was living there with no furniture, no bathroom, and no water. All that was in there was sheets of masonite, some made into really crappy paintings, a bunch of painting supplies and paint. There was several months' worth of garbage. Think bread bags full of crap. And for some reason, a deep freezer full of ice cream and nothing else. The man made the place stink. Story 25. My mother-in-law had rental property on the poor side of town. Most tenants were welfare recipients, and though the rent was paid by welfare, the money was given to the tenant to pay to the landlord. As a result, she had lots of people take the last 2 months of rent a skip out to Ontario or Alberta. She was in Newfoundland. Her garage filled up with really crappy furniture after a couple of years. Funny footnote, my girlfriend needed a toaster, so I checked with my now ex-mother-in-law. And sure enough, she has one I can take for GF. It's an antique from the 50s, one of those upright ones that can hold 6 slices. GF is delighted at this beautiful appliance, until she makes toast with it, and instead of toast when the sides snap open, it flung 4 fireballs across the counter. Luckily, no damage was done. Story 26. My grandparents-in-law had this female tenant that went into a coma and was put in the hospital. They decided to be nice and not evict her, as she wasn't paying rent. In the meantime, her husband came back from prison and turned their 2-bedroom house into a 5-bedroom flophouse. It was about a year later that I was there when we gave them an eviction notice. Inside the house, it looked like it was Mad Max land. So much garbage everywhere. The back had no less than 10 cars, a bus, and a boat. It was incredible. The husband, of course, threatened to sue due to black mold. After they were gone, it took 2 large containers of garbage to clear out. The entire year, they didn't charge them rent. Story 27. I rented houses for years in both weekly vacation type situations and as housing for traveling nurses. Vacation homes, I had a huge deposit, and we did a background and credit, sometimes placing a hold on an account. Never had a single issue. On the traveling nurses, I had to do an insurance walk through and found several of my nurses from the Philippines were only using the master suite. They had the rest of the apartment sealed off with plastic. Our units were a small living room, half wall to EIK, to hold 2 bedrooms, one with a suite bath, the other used a hall bath. The girls taped off everything but the hall to the bedrooms and hall bath. They had dorm fridges and hot plates, rice cookers and toaster ovens. One girl had one of those little burners they use on omelet buffets. The insurance man was not very happy. Now I lease property. It's so much easier.